Math is indeed one of these subjects which many people are afraid of, and science as well. I've thought a lot about how we can try to help everybody find that math and science are interesting and maybe not even that hard. And I think one of the keys is to show that you can understand both through thinking. I've thought a lot about this because when I work in education for mathematics and science, really the hurdle isn't having information available. Anyone who wants information can already find it. It's all on the internet, it's all in the libraries. So really what we need to overcome is for people to see that this is something which is not that hard to learn and not that scary. But math and science have something which is built in, which makes them seem hard and scary, which is that it's possible to get the answer wrong. You see, with math and science, unlike with reading, writing, and art, there is really a right answer and a wrong answer. And the fear of being wrong can often make people think that they don't want to do math or science. The way I often think about how to help people understand that they're not scary is to show people how to learn math and science through thinking. Because if you work on a thought process, then you don't actually need to worry as much about whether the answer is right or wrong. Instead, you can think about whether or not the pathway for thinking was correct or incorrect. You see, a focus on just answers and just results is dangerous because if you just happen to get the wrong answer, even though you had the right way of thinking about it, it's still wrong. On the other hand, if what you learn is how to think through every problem that you work on, then you can actually get value. You can see that you had a very good idea even when the answer is not actually correct. And that's actually how I teach all of my classes. The way I teach all of my classes at Carnegie Mellon University or in the online classes that we teach focuses on helping each person learn how to think of their own way to solve a problem. For example, in my class I teach at Carnegie Mellon, it's possible to get the full points for a question even if the answer is wrong. But that's of course because the question itself was so hard in the first place that if you could figure out what to do, because I hadn't taught you exactly how to do that problem, if you figured out what to do, you've really already solved the crux of the problem. And so I think that actually one thing that we can do with education is to try to help everyone learn how to invent their own ways to solve problems. And this is indeed what you can do with personalized education. This is what we do with the Daily Challenge with Po-Shen Loh, the online math courses, where we don't actually show how to solve a problem first. Instead, we first present a problem that a person should not be able to solve. These are problems that are just outside of what a student is able to do. And then we invite the student to think about it. A minute later, after they've already thought about it, we then give a hint. It's a special hint architected for the problem. Another minute after that, there's a bigger hint. And after these two hints, even though the student may not have known how to do the problem at the beginning, they suddenly may have a lot of ideas, and they may even figure out how to do the problem before the teacher, me, shows them how to do it. And so this is a way of using online technology and personalization to a person's own pace of learning to help them learn how to think. And my hope is that if people go through learning mathematics and science by thinking like this, then they'll be less scared of whether the answer itself was right or wrong. They'll see that they've already conquered the problem, even if the answer may not quite be right. I actually think that, unfortunately, mathematics is a subject which many people consider boring, formulaic, and full of memorization. And as you mentioned, I have had this focus on personalizing education, or if more broadly what I could say is making it possible for each person to experience for themselves why things work in mathematics and in science. So one of my passions has been to try to help everyone see that they can think about mathematics. You see, I maybe at the beginning of this interview, I was indicating that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a world where people can make better decisions. Ultimately, I want to make a world where people like thinking and are pretty good at that. And I'm talking about logical reasoning. But the only way to learn logical reasoning is that you spend time doing logical reasoning yourself. It's very hard to learn how to create a new innovation or create a new idea or a new way of solving a problem if all you've ever done is watch somebody else do math problems and then you copy them 10 times. And then you do a test where your job is to copy them another 10 times. So the way that we actually designed all of the products, both the free and the not free ones, that's on xp.com and on the Daily Challenge with Po-Shen Loh, the way we designed everything was to allow each person to be able to attack problems and challenge themselves. In xp.com, the way we did that is we actually built personalized learning where the problems that you face would automatically have their difficulty detected based on how successful other people in the world are at solving them. And then it would feed you problems that are harder and harder as you demonstrate you're capable of doing things. This is the personalization, and this ultimately lets you try to unlock these hard challenges where you have to fight through it. But then we also built the Daily Challenge because we found out that there are actually multiple different audiences when it comes to education. Some people are interested in just passing the class, get a D and be done. And that's fine, I respect that. The world needs lots of different kinds of people. Then there are other people who say, I already got an A, but I don't feel like I'm learning much. Or maybe they are looking at the global standard and they're looking at what is being taught in lots of other countries. And they're saying, I got an A, but I have a feeling that there's a lot more math to learn. That's why we made the Daily Challenge. And with the Daily Challenge, we just used the online format to, again, give this personalization. The idea was, and this was fun, actually, the idea was, how can we try to use online as an advantage? How can we try to actually give each person a personal moment where they can discover something? And ultimately, how we cracked it is we said, make every question that the person does a question that they don't know how to start. This is fundamentally different from how you normally learn. Normally, the only questions you do, you know exactly what to do because you copy. Here it was, go and take all the concepts that you would learn, put them in order with some very interesting questions where each one is just out of reach. And then on each question, you think about it for a minute, and a minute later, use the online system to give a hint. And then a minute after that, give a bigger hint. And then only after that, discuss. And what this does is it causes each person to, each student will get to engage their brain as they try to figure out how you'd solve it. And ultimately, they even feel proud. It's like they figured it out before the teacher showed them. So indeed, my focus before was on this personalization of the thinking process, so that hopefully everyone in the world can learn to think better and then make better decisions individually and collectively. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a place that doesn't have that many people who are Chinese American. Well, at least it didn't when I was growing up there in the early 1980s. And as I grew up as a child, I remember that I was growing up with two different influences, the influence of the Eastern culture and also the Western culture at the same time. I thought this was in fact quite interesting, although certainly as I was growing up, I had to try to reconcile these two whenever there was any differences between them. I would say that when I was young, I think I learned a lot from my parents. And so, of course, I had a very strong Eastern influence. And in fact, when I was in elementary school, I would often do quite a lot of mathematics at home. Now, the mathematics, I don't want to say that's not the only thing about Eastern influence, but I want to mention a little bit about the mathematics only because that has something to do with what has become my way of interpreting math. In fact, when I was young, my parents, because they came from Singapore, they were teaching me my mother was teaching me mathematics through the Singaporean methods. And the reason was because my parents weren't sure whether or not they would go back to Singapore after a few years. And their hope was that if they went back to Singapore, I wouldn't be the worst student in the school. Because the way it worked in Singapore in the early 1980s was that if you go to school, the school would rank all of the people based on how good they were in the subjects. And then they would split into classes based on how high you ranked. And they were worried that if I didn't keep up with what my Singaporean counterparts were doing, even though I was in America, then if we ever moved back, then I'd be at the bottom of the school, which would be quite bad. And so, in fact, they found the Singaporean textbooks for mathematics, even for Chinese, and I was trying to keep up with all of these at the same time in America. And that certainly helped me to gain a foundation in mathematics, learning from that method. Although I didn't really spend a huge amount of time doing mathematics, that was just simply to keep up with the Singaporean standard. That was all that was. It was only later, when I went to middle school, that I discovered mathematics competitions. And these mathematics competitions were very exciting to me because they were finally problems that I didn't know how to solve. before, I had always done problems that were maybe from the textbooks. And in these textbook problems, you would know what to do. Basically, somebody would teach you how to solve this kind of problem, and then you do a lot of them. That was how I was learning when I was in elementary school. But in middle school, suddenly I found questions that not even the person who was teaching me, my mother, knew how to do them immediately. And that was interesting, because then it became a chance for me to see if I could even come up with something. And I could also see that she thought the questions were interesting, presumably because she thought it was neat to try to think about a problem that she didn't know how to do immediately. And it was through these middle school math competitions that I finally found out that mathematics was about more than just trying to remember how to do a problem, but rather it was about how to think about how to solve a problem. Now, as I grew up and I went into high school and so on, I started to also become even more aware of the Asian American identity, or the Asian identity, or the American identity, or the mix of all of these. And I found it to be, in the end, an asset to be able to live in either of those spheres comfortably. Sometimes people think that maybe if you happen to grow up where you are an outsider, that might be a disadvantage. But I would say that there is always an advantage to being able to see the world from different perspectives, as long as you're comfortable with yourself. I think that self-confidence is something that is very important. In fact, for me, that self-confidence came from mathematics, from knowing that I could do certain things that were supposed to be hard. And then as I navigated my way through life, I would look at what each culture said about any particular topic. And I would have the confidence to go and decide, in certain cases, I think that this is a little bit better. In certain cases, I think that that's a little bit better. And in the end, I would say that I probably created a fusion for myself of the Asian and American cultures to be who I am now. Later in life, which is when I was in my 30s, I decided I really was very, very curious about my Chinese ethnicity, and I wanted to learn Chinese even better. So I started going to China very frequently. I'd go almost every 2 months, actually, for about 3 years, all the way up until COVID-19 became a major problem. I was going to China every 2 months. And as I went to China, I would go to all different cities. I think I went to about 17 or 18 cities altogether so far in China. I thought it was really interesting. It was a great way for me to learn Chinese, because if you go to China and you give math talks to hundreds of students, you use Chinese, and that's the best way to learn Chinese. Basically, what happened is that while I was practicing Chinese by talking to all these people, they were in some sense gaining some mathematics, because we were doing this exchange between me providing mathematics and also getting Chinese experience at the same time. But after doing this for so long, I actually found out that it was very interesting to be able to be comfortable in both worlds. When I'm in China, I do certain things and I feel very comfortable. When I'm in America, I work in certain ways and I feel very comfortable. This is actually very much inspired by myself also watching the students, the international students from China who came to my university. I work at Carnegie Mellon University, and we have lots of students who are from China, and interestingly enough, a lot of them study for 4 years at an American high school before coming to Carnegie Mellon University. 上美高. And so when they do this, I found out that these people are very, very remarkable in that when they are in college in the United States, they are able to interface and interact with everybody as if they grew up entirely in America. I wouldn't even have been able to tell. But when I see them in China, for example, when I go to China to give these talks, I find out that they're completely comfortable as if they grew up in China. And being able to see that a person could simultaneously switch between these two worlds, completely fluent in both languages and both cultures, made me realize that it's actually a huge asset to be able to embrace both parts in some sense, and then to use each one whenever you need to. I've been inspired by a number of different people, and each of them in a very different way. Okay, so I'm going to say a few extremely famous people, and then I'll say someone who's more personal. So some extremely famous people, there is, of course, a mathematician named Terence Tao. He's an extremely famous mathematician. He's considered by many to be one of the most brilliant minds of our lifetime. And he printed something on me, which is, I actually had the chance to learn from him because I spent 2 years at UCLA when I was a PhD student. I even took a class from him. So seeing the person up close is very interesting. You see that it's a real person who's really dedicated to his craft and who thinks at the speed of light. You can just see these kinds of things. But then what was very inspiring was not just that he thinks at the speed of light. It was that his story involved learning and learning and learning and continuing to learn. He actually wasn't satisfied with only learning one branch of mathematics. He learned many branches of mathematics. And that's in some sense why he was able to contribute so much. Many people are generally learning for a long period of their life, and then after that they go into producing, which is using all the skills that they have. But I've been inspired by watching what happens if you never stop learning and never stop challenging yourself. And I've tried to do that myself too. Another person, also a mathematician who influenced me, is a name called Paul Erdős. Now, he's not alive, and I never met him in person. The name is spelled E-R-D-O-S. The name is spelled E-R-D-O-S, and his name is pronounced Erdős. Very famous Hungarian mathematician, and he was one of the most prolific mathematicians of the last century. He wrote almost like 1,000 papers, research articles, I think over 1,000 papers, co-authored with other mathematicians. But he dedicated his whole life to his craft. He actually had no home. He had no belongings. He just had 2 suitcases. And he would go and live in different professors' houses. He had no job either, I believe. He basically just lived with other professors, coming up with mathematics together. And he also cared a lot about the next generation. He actually really cared about inspiring the next generation to also be mathematicians. So even though he had no house, no job, he was one of the most successful people. But he also left that's a story. That's called somebody really, really committed to doing something. Now, there are also other people that inspire me, not just mathematicians. And that might also explain why I chose to get involved in things like NOVID, or why I built XP or the Daily Challenge. I actually am also very much inspired by people like Elon Musk. To me, the fact that somebody would keep making huge bets to try to solve humanity's major issues is very interesting. And when I say solve humanity's major issues, I just mean come up with amazing innovations that could help bring our civilization to a better place. And the story of Elon Musk is very interesting. He actually would even risk a lot of his own capital in order to go and try to make these things happen. And he works like crazy. And so somehow looking at that story of somebody so committed to trying to uplift humankind and also quite brilliant and using science at the same time, very remarkable. To me, another person that I find inspirational is Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a person who at first built a business empire, but then he chose to dedicate the rest of his life to actively get involved in philanthropy. He doesn't just give money. He actually is actively participating, and he's a brilliant guy to begin with. So to me, the idea that these are ways that you could merge between business and using whatever had been earned from business to have social impact, that's very interesting. So these are kind of like big figures. But another figure that was important is a figure who's closer to me, my PhD advisor, Benny Sudakov. So he is a mathematician, and now this is a person that I spent a lot of time with, working directly with. And I saw what it means to indeed be dedicated to your craft, because I could see this person up close. And I could also see what it meant to be entrepreneurial. So he was a math professor. He is still a math professor in Zurich. However, he actually had spent a year in business school earlier too. So it's one of these unusual combinations of a person who is brilliant, really great pure mathematician, but also understands the world well enough to be able to see that the world is more than maybe just living in one bubble. And watching the things hybridized together was remarkable to me. I spent so much time with him. I also learned how to work hard, right? You can work hard. You can read about stories of other people working hard. But if you see someone in front of you like that, and you see someone so passionate, you say, gee, it's possible. And the person's it's not just like some fairy tale, it's the real thing. So I've actually had the opportunity to be inspired by all of these different kinds of people. I think that's very important. I think actually that causes us as humans to reach for more. And what I always try to do is I always try to see the great things that humans are able to do, and then myself to do my little bit of trying to strive towards them. I think that the biggest challenge for society right now is COVID-19. That's actually why I myself decided to get involved in trying to fight the spread of COVID-19. Why do I say this? I say this because it's impacting all different aspects of life. we are a social society. Actually, the word society and the word social have a lot in common. And in order for us to function as people, we need to have interactions with other people. I don't just mean to keep us happy. I mean, that's actually how we earn money. That's how we learn. That's how we advance as a civilization. So when I see COVID-19 causing many people to not be able to work, or cause many people to not be able to go to school, this is going to have a very, very big negative impact on the advance of human civilization. So I view that the biggest challenge right now for us all as a society is to come up with some ways. There will not be one way, but to come up with all different kinds of ways to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Fortunately, it's possible for each person to help. I think that the mistake would be if everyone says, well, there's nothing we can do, we'll just stay at home because the government said to stay at home. That's not sustainable. Some people will start losing their jobs. We already saw that happen. And when they lose their jobs, they don't have money to buy other things. And then more people lose their jobs. At the very beginning, maybe some people thought COVID-19 won't affect me because I have a job that lets me work at home. Well, we just heard that Airbnb has laid off people. Uber has laid off people. All of these technology companies are laying off people because people aren't able to, other people aren't able to buy the services that these technology companies provide. So I think that everyone should be actively thinking about what you can do. And the fortunate thing is that you can start small. Individual choices of behavior that we make reduce the amount of virus that we spread. And that's where we decided to get involved with NOVID to help at least let everyone have a sense of whether they are themselves spreading the virus. No person's path is entirely straight, even if it looks like that person has accomplished some things. Actually, my opinion is that in order to accomplish things, you basically have to be very good at failing and getting up again. I mean, in my personal past, definitely there have been personal and professional challenges before. If I was to think about personal challenges, I think that a lot of times when you participate in competitions or when you try to push yourself very hard, then you get very invested in trying to do something and you care very much about it. And then if you succeed or if you fail, it can sometimes have a very large psychological impact. I say this because I know that many people who are watching this may either themselves be participating in competitions or maybe they have kids who are. And I just want to say, as a person who's been deep inside these, whenever you get seriously involved in something, your emotions heighten. And what I've noticed is that, unfortunately, sometimes people who are flying at the very top are maybe even more susceptible to having emotional breakdowns if they don't manage to maintain their position at the top. I'm saying this because some people assume that the best thing you can do in your life is always try to be at the top. But it's also dangerous because if that's how you identify yourself, the moment you're not at the top, it can be crushing. And so just to share a little bit about this from my own experience, right? I learned this in some sense the hard way, where when I was doing these competitions in middle school, at the end of 7th grade, I actually felt quite good. I felt like, I probably had the victory next year of being the top person in my particular city because we knew the results from the previous year. And so when the next year rolled around, I participated. And then I found out that, good gracious, I was not the best in my city. But why? There was some new person who had just showed up. Actually, there was a person who I'd never met before. And this person had come directly from China. Now, this student ended up being the best in the city. And I mean, my impression at the time was, wow, how can that be? Why is there such bad luck that somebody somehow suddenly shows up in my city and is suddenly the best? Is it just that I'm very unlucky? And being able to see these kinds of things and to think about this from a younger age maybe made me a little bit more resilient to understanding that no matter how good your plans are, you never know, something mysterious can happen that's outside of your control, and it's important not to ever put yourself too emotionally invested in any one outcome. A very funny story about this particular guy who landed in my city. Actually, he was really good. The next year, which is the year after I was no longer involved, but the year afterwards, he actually was the national champion in the entire United States of America. So effectively what I had happen was that the most brilliant person in the United States of America just happened to land there. And by seeing things like this, I guess it just helped me to go through the rest of life and say, life is perhaps not just about a competition. Life is actually something where you try to do the best yourself. You have no control over what other people might do, but you can always compete against yourself. And so I eventually decided to just benchmark against myself. If I was to talk about professional challenges, well, I'm facing them right now. I'm building this app called NOVID, and NOVID is supposed to help to stop the spread of COVID-19 worldwide. But there are enormous challenges here because even after making the app and releasing it online on April 7th of 2020, we discovered that the biggest challenges were not just the technological side. We found out that in order for it even to appear in the Apple or Google app stores as a free download, it was required to get letters of support from government officials. It was required to get a lot of formal legal approval. And that's hard. Actually, I struggled through that for about a month of constantly asking anyone I knew and having lots of people come from all different corners of the world to come and help to ultimately get us to the point that we were at. But even then, we're not done. I mean, our professional challenges around the NOVID app are now around trying to help more people even know that this exists. And here I've even found out that if you come up with an idea, even if the idea might be the best one that the world has right now, the journalists, the people who write the news stories, might not choose to talk about it. And that's actually what we're facing right now. Even when we try to reach out to the journalists, the people who are writing the news for everyone in the world to see, even getting their attention to talk about the fact that America is starting to go back outside in all of the different cities. And there's no way of knowing whether anyone has come close to COVID-19. We have made the first and the only currently available app that is anonymous that lets people do this. But even that message has not been able to get its way into the media. So that's a major professional challenge. We're facing it right now. And we're working on it, but I'm not about to give up. The NOVID app on Android is extremely battery efficient, where if you look at the apps sorted by battery usage, it's not on the first screen. Now, on the iPhone, unfortunately, Apple does have these restrictions. And since they put restrictions on what you can do in the background, we need to run in the foreground. We have actually engineered a system which manages to use less battery in the foreground, and especially, so I'm talking about iOS, and especially if you happen to have and especially if you happen to have a newer phone which has what is called an OLED display. Some of these Apple iPhones, like iPhone 10 and higher, have a display for which it looks beautiful. And in fact, if something is lit up on the screen, it uses battery for just that pixel. But if the screen is dark in other places, it uses no battery in the other places. So in fact, what we've made is for all of the modern iPhones, we actually have a version of the app that can stay on the screen at all times. And it actually uses very little battery because it's not lighting up the entire screen. On the older iPhones, we dim the screen or we turn the screen black. But these are all things we're working on right now. We're actually quite proud of the modern iPhone version because that helps to overcome the battery usage while also keeping it in the front. So you asked if there's something surprising about me that people might not know or might not guess. Well, I'm happy to share that some people may assume that, maybe for a lot of my life, I was the kind of person who's comfortable on a camera and enjoys talking to lots of people. That's not actually necessarily that true. Actually, when I was in middle school and high school, I was not necessarily the most comfortable. In fact, maybe quite the opposite. I might have been more similar to that stereotype you see in the movies of that kid who does math, right? But what I wanted to share, why I wanted to say this, is because it's also a message of hope, in the sense that for anyone who's watching this who might be younger, if you're thinking that, oh, you're just this person who seems like you would never fit in with anyone, or maybe you're not cool or something like that, well, that stuff all can change, in the sense that whatever you are, even personality-wise, at a younger age, if you go and actively make efforts to go and try to pick up other kinds of skills, then it can change. One of my students once asked a person who knew me in high school and asked, what was Po-Shen like when he was in high school? And that person, my friend, told this guy, he said, Po-Shen was with the same amount of energy, but just not as focused. right? So the way that you should think about this, the way I often think about this, is that every single person has something that they can contribute to the world or to whatever they're trying to do, and that's their energy. And the question is just, where are you directing this energy? And if in high school or middle school I was maybe a little bit more of the nervous type, who might direct this energy in ways that are not focused at all, moving your hands or wiggling too much or something like that, if you learn how to focus it down onto a goal, then you can actually achieve more. And I'll also share a little bit about things that I ended up learning. I mean, tricks, how to try to learn maybe how to communicate a little bit better. Well, first of all, I took a very active approach, that whenever I went into a different environment, whenever I started in a new environment, I would actually often think, it's a great opportunity. Nobody here knows me. So maybe I can try to fix any of the strange behaviors that I had before that people knew me for. And maybe I can try to see if there's a new way that's more effective at dealing with people and working with people. And by doing this multiple times, every time I changed schools or changed environments, it caused me to be able to make sort of like generational leaps on what were effective personalities. But most recently, maybe about a year ago to 2 years ago, I in fact spent almost a year taking improvisational comedy classes here in Pittsburgh. This was at the recommendation of a group which was helping me to create videos that would help the general public enjoy math. And they suggested you should get into improv comedy. It can be very useful. And so I, in fact, went and registered for every improv comedy class that I could find in the city of Pittsburgh. And this was great, because improv comedy teaches you not really just how to be funny. That's not the goal. Improv comedy teaches you how to take any situation, be calm through it, even if you're getting weird questions or even if you're interacting with people who say things that you don't expect, and you're able to kind of respond even as if it was expected, if it was natural. That's a skill that is very, very powerful, whether you're trying to communicate with people or even if you're trying to, in your workplace, get your idea forward. So I did this for a year, and I think that the result of that was another transformation for me in terms of effectiveness in communicating with people. What's my favorite math joke? This one has a good story. So when I was growing up, I went to a lot of math competitions, and what people do at math competitions is they wear T-shirts with math jokes on them. I know it's a very, very strange, nerdy thing to do, but honestly, where else can you wear T-shirts with math jokes other than a math competition? So these people all love to wear them. And here's a very popular one that I had seen on many, many T-shirts when I was growing up. It had a pie, and it had an I. And the pie had a speech bubble saying, "Get real." And the I had a speech bubble saying, "Be rational." Why? The reason is because pi could tell I, "Get real," because I is not a real number, it's an imaginary number. And I replies, "Be rational," because pi is not a rational number. It cannot be written as an integer divided by an integer. Of course, this is a funny joke because both of these numbers are all weird anyway. They're very strange numbers. So it's sort of like what we call in English the pot calling the kettle black. They're both insulting each other for things, but they're both fundamentally messed up in the first place. Now, this is a fun joke, but it turns out that I think that many people didn't figure out the punchline they should add to this joke. In fact, I didn't see the punchline until we discovered this very interesting way to add one more component onto this joke, which makes it a wonderful whole piece of mathematics. We added one more participant in this conversation. So there's a pi and there's an I, and we added E down here. And E just said, "Join me," and will be a dash 1. So join me and will be 1. Now, what is E saying? So first of all, it sounds like they're just having some kind of a conversation where two people are arguing with each other and insulting each other. And then here's this E saying, just join us and we'll be 1. And we can all get along. But the reason this is a great math joke is because if you take E raised to the power of pi times I, the answer is -1. This is, in fact, part of the most beautiful equation in mathematics, Euler's identity. Euler's identity says e to the power pi times I plus 1 equals 0. And it's considered the most beautiful equation in mathematics because it combines the 5 fundamental constants that you'd see in mathematics: 0, 1, I, E, and pi. And they all can combine in this equation where everything kind of cancels out. And even though you had really weird numbers like pi and I, if you took an e raised to that with another weird number, the whole thing simplifies to -1. So this, in my opinion, is the ultimate punchline to that joke where there had been t-shirts running all over the United States and maybe other parts of the world for decades with just the pi and the I, but no one had thought to put the e there. Now, I personally also like this joke very much because that e to the pi I, that is also the name for the social enterprise that I run. I run a social enterprise called XP. XP is in fact the organization that's behind NOVID. And XP has its name, EXPII, because it's in fact the most beautiful equation in mathematics. It's the exponential of pi times I. So my favorite math joke is this punchline, the addition of this punchline to a joke that had been around for decades. But for whatever reason, people just hadn't noticed that you could make both pi and I happy. You could make the answer both real and rational just by adding e. My work before NOVID was primarily around mathematics and education. Actually, you might be able to unite all of my works as things that are trying to help more people in the world help themselves. This is actually what I strongly believe in. I believe that if everybody gains skills or gains tools to go and help themselves be more intelligent or to make better decisions or to be safer, then we're in a better world, because it's better if all 7 to 8 billion of us have more power ourselves. The things that I was doing before were educational, to help everybody be able to make better decisions or to have more information. And these were around xp.com, which is a free website that people can use that lets the general public learn mathematics and science for free. That was one. And that, of course, needed to be funded by something. So because for some reason some people in the world enjoyed the way that I taught mathematics, we created the daily challenge with Po-Shen Loh, where I, in fact, personally rethought how you should teach middle school mathematics to the most ambitious students, maybe, say, the top 10% in their school. I rethought how you do all of that. And then I used the online format to, in fact, teach people how to think, as opposed to just teaching people facts. So that became the daily challenge with Po-Shen Loh, basically a math course that taught you how to invent ways to think about math to turn all future math courses easy. But then because we had both of these things running, when COVID-19 struck, we decided to start to give back with whatever resources we had. And for example, because we had a high-level studio for producing those daily challenge with Po-Shen Loh lessons, I just started doing a daily YouTube live stream using all of the equipment in the setup so that everyone in the world who wanted to join for a particular hour would be able to have a free interactive math session with me, where I would answer math questions about anything. And this was fun because that also used my improvisational background. In fact, I wanted to challenge myself to make improvisationally math lessons with no preparation. It's just showing how really a mathematician might think about all kinds of things. Actually, this is an unusual experience because oftentimes when you go and learn something, the teacher has already prepared in advance something that's cooked to give you. This was trying to show middle school students and high school students all around the world how you would think if you suddenly were faced with something new. And then finally, because we were fortunate enough that many people wanted to join our daily challenge online courses, those are not free, but because people joined that, we actually had the resources to create the first version of NOVID. And that was because I realized that we have to do something immediately to stop the spread of COVID-19. And at a time when it was not possible to go and try to raise funding to go and build an app, we just donated what we had. And we said, let's just go and see what we can do to try to help the world if there isn't anything else being done at the moment. So that's the connection between all of the different things that we do. I ultimately am a social entrepreneur. I'm a social entrepreneur. And what that means is that my goals are social. I have some things that I'm trying to achieve to help various aspects of the world and civilization. But you have to find a way to make that run somehow. And so ultimately, we use the daily challenge with Po-Shen Loh online math courses as the route to deliver to people something they want anyway, and then to use that to fund the creation of things that help everyone else learn, as well as hopefully something to keep everyone safe.